And now, here's Dialogue, a podcast with Gene Richard from Kbze 105.9 FM. Today's show is being sponsored by...
Camp Lejeune Justice is responsible for the content of this ad. Attention Marines, military, contractors, and family members stationed at Camp Lejeune for 30 days or longer between August 1953 and December of 1987. For 34 years, those at Camp Lejeune were exposed to contaminated drinking water, resulting in devastating injuries. Passage of the Camp Lejeune Justice Act of 2022 would allow victims to seek compensation for illnesses and injuries linked to the toxic water.
For a free consultation, call 800-311-3532. That's 800-311-3532.
And good morning, listeners and viewers here. We're at podcast for Kbze 105.9 here, sitting in front of the courthouse again. And boy, this is getting to be a regular spot for us, and it's beautiful. And with us this morning, we've got the sheriff's right-hand man, his public information officer, with Mr. Brennan Matherne. Brennan, welcome to the program.
Hey, Gene, thanks for having me.
Good, thank you. Been a while since we had you on. And, you know, let's do our normal holiday thing because we got Thanksgiving right around the corner. We've got Christmas right around the corner. And I think we need to talk about scams. I think we need to talk about driver safety. I think we need to talk about drinking and a whole bunch of other things. But let's talk about scams first. And I know you and I know the sheriff's office and you as well as us are big on that. And it looks like that's the time of year when everybody comes out of the closet.
And you know, it's frustrating too, Gene. Now that I'm captain over the South Lafourche substation, every day, it seems like at least once a week, we have people coming in that have lost thousands or tens of thousands of dollars that unfortunately they're never going to get back. And these are scams that are coordinated mostly by overseas accounts. It's rare, if ever. We have to work with authorities on the national level, sometimes on an international level, to try to investigate this, and it becomes nearly impossible. It's rare that you'll see a local scam, but we can talk about that as well a little bit, especially when you go out to the stores and you're shopping in person. But backtracking a little bit, talking about phone scams, obviously, and email scams. They've gotten more and more sophisticated, and I know that you and I have talked over the years about it. The grandparent scam being one of the worst ones because it's pulling on those heartstrings, so to speak, and trying to suggest that either in some cases they'll impersonate a grandchild, or in other cases they'll tell you that they have a grandchild being held in a jail or some type of facility, and they need money. What I can tell you is whether it's a grandparent scam or someone claiming to be your utility company asking for a payment, what I can tell you is all of them follow a similar pattern, and they're all going to show obvious signs of a scam. For example, anytime that they're calling you and asking for personal information, such as account numbers or anything, or asking for payment on a call, that's pretty much a telltale sign of a scam. It's rare, if ever, that you'll have a company or even a public entity that will call you and say, hey, we need you to make a payment right now on the phone, especially if they're being urgent about it. Even the sheriff's office, it's possible that we may call and tell you proactively, hey, there's going to be a warrant issued for your arrest if you don't take care of this. But we don't demand immediate payment over the phone. We'll tell you, hey, come into our office or call us back when you have payment. There's always going to be an option if you're dealing with a legitimate entity. With these scam artists, they're trying to get you to pay immediately. In fact, they don't want you to hang up the phone. We've also seen really intricate scams over email, scams that may last days, if not weeks or months. I had one person come into the office that he had been essentially catfished, which is to say someone claiming to be a woman and claiming to be in a relationship with him. And this took place over the course of several months. And then all of a sudden he gets a message from her that he's in that she needs to her vehicle's been repossessed and she needs money to get it, and he needs to send over the money. And so of course he comes to our office, and you know, we hate to break it to him, but this is a scam. We've seen intricate scams where they'll email local businesses asking for payment in advance. They're coming in and they want payment in advance for they're going to pay you in advance for services, and they'll send a check. and only to find out if you end up cashing that check, the bank will later call you and say, hey, this is a bad check, and then you'll be on the hook to the bank for those funds. What they'll typically do is say, look, I'll send you this check and you realize the check is for too much, just send me the amount back. And so not only are you out the funds from the original check, but now you're also out the funds that you sent back. One thing that we see and has been common over the years, Gene, is the green dot cards or sending money via like Western Union or something like that. The issue with that, and the way that makes it almost impossible to track, is that you're essentially giving up that money. Unlike a credit card where someone makes a fraudulent charge, you have there are balances and safety nets in place with your bank, so that, I mean, I can't think of a single fraudulent charge I've ever had to pay for in my entire life, because my banks and my credit card companies have taken on that challenge of trying to make it right. But the moment that you decide to wire money to someone or purchase a gift card of any sort or a prepaid debit card of any sort, you have voluntarily given over that money, and now you've voluntarily given that money to someone else. Now, granted, it's still a crime in and of itself, but it becomes much harder to track, and it becomes much harder to, you don't have those safety nets in place as you would with a fraudulent charge on a credit card.
Let me ask you this. And I've checked since you and I probably talked last on the radio. I get an average on my landline between 15 and 18 calls per day. It's Medicare, it's health insurance, not the Blue Cross, the car's you're right, the car's warranty, a back brace or an arm brace or a knee brace or something concerning Medicare. Amazon, we're charging $1,299 to your Amazon account. If this is not fact, please press so and so and call so and so, and all of those scams. Most of them, Brennan, come from phone numbers that I've never seen. Some of them are now coming from 985 numbers with maybe a 446 or a 447 number, but most of them from numbers that I've never seen. Would it be fit to tell the public to say, if you don't recognize the number, don't answer it? That's what my wife does. She doesn't answer it. But I mean, that's a scary thing, because it could be somebody looking for you. But when you think about it, there's always email. There's always they'll call back. There's always a way to get you if they need you.
You think about, what did we used to do, 20, 30 years ago, when someone needed you or it was an emergency, you called them on the telephone. Well, they didn't have a phone on them, so you had to call where you thought they might be, at home, at work, whatever, and you might not get in touch with them. Even with a pager, you're still going to have a call back. But society has become such that we expect everything to happen immediately. To your point, that's exactly what I do. I mean, so whether you want to take this advice or not, like you said, it could always be an emergency from a number we don't know. But guess what? I have voicemail. And as long as you have your voicemail is not full, that person will leave a voicemail. They may text you if it's a legitimate call. If it's a call like from a landline phone, for example, and they're just calling your number, again, they'll leave a voicemail, hopefully, and that's why we encourage people to leave voicemails. It's become to where it's not commonplace to do so. But let's face it, if you're in a situation where you're calling from a strange phone, or you're calling from a phone that's not your cell phone, and you need to get in touch with someone bad enough, leave them a voicemail. If nothing else, to leave them a voicemail to say, hey, look, I'm going to be here. I'm okay. I don't have a way for you to reach me, but this is where I'm at, and I'm okay, or I need this. But for the public receiving the calls, I do concur, and that's what I use personally. If it's a number I don't know or I don't recognize, I'll let it go to voicemail. And look, being the public information officer, it is a lot of times a reporter or a new reporter. I have most of the reporters' cell phones that call, but maybe a new reporter just started and they'll call and I don't recognize the number and it goes to voicemail. Well, I'll call them right back, and they know that. So it's not a horrible thing to let it go to voicemail, and if it's important enough, someone will let you receive that call. There's also plenty, depending on if you have an iPhone, an Android phone, there's plenty of apps out there that will identify those spam risk calls. I have, I think, a couple of them plugged in on my phone, and so when it is a number I don't know, it'll actually say spam risk when it's probably a scam call. In fact, I've never had that pop up when it's a legitimate call. So those are all ways that you can protect yourself. Now, on a landline, it becomes more difficult because you don't have the technology you would have on your cell phone. But most people that have landlines still do have some sort of answering machine or some sort of voicemail that they can. So it's the same principle there. I would expect, if it's important enough, that someone would leave me a voicemail.
And help me out with this. Never, ever, ever, unless you initiate the call, never, ever give your Social Security number. God forbid, never give your bank account number. Never give who you are. Never give your age, IQ, and number, whatever. Never, ever give that information out unless maybe you made the call to the bank or you made the call to a company you're having a problem with and you know who you're talking to. That's a different story. Other than that, clam up.
Yeah, look, and I've got a great story about that. So that's true, Gene. You do not want to give your personal information out. If it's a legitimate call and it's a legitimate company, then they should tell you something to the fact of, look, you can call us back and make this payment, but we need it today. If it's an urgent payment that's needed, again, that's typically a sign of a scam. But if it's, let's say, a utility company calling saying, hey, we're going to cut off your power today, again, that's probably a scam. But let's say that you can't remember if you paid and now you're a couple months overdue. Well, hang up, call your utility company by the number that you have or the number that you can Google, that number that you can look up and know for sure that you're talking to a person, and then say, hey, look, I got this phone call, just trying to make sure it's legit, and then they'll tell you whether you have a payment owed or not. But again, getting back to, I have a great story about that. So during tax season, which we're about to come into, where people are going to receive their 2022 tax statements. Earlier this year, we were requiring payment on the 2021 tax payments that were delayed. Normally, they're due December 31st. Because of Ida, they were due actually May 31st. Well, now this Thanksgiving and Christmas, you'll be receiving that gift from us in the form of your 2022 tax statement, right? So we actually last year, because there was a lot of confusion with taxes, we had to contact several people out of the norm that wouldn't normally get a phone call. Normally you get your tax bill and you pay it and that's it. But there was a lot of things out of the normal. So there were several people that we called, and one person that we would call, we were just trying to verify that we were actually trying to give them money back. We were trying to give them a refund because they had overpaid on their taxes. And so my clerk was just trying to verify, hey, did you pay on this date? And they were like, well, I don't know who you are. I don't know if this is the sheriff's office. So we said, okay, well, look, give me a call back. And they said, oh, no, I'm not calling that number. I'm calling dispatch. And so he said, great. And that's what I told her. Look, that was great, because that says that what we're teaching people is really working. So I was actually glad to see that.
You know, that's a great story. But listeners, I think we're talking to Brennan. We're listening to what, this is what he does in his office, part of what they do for a living. So if you've got any problems, you think you got a problem, give you a call or give the sheriff's office a call. Not you directly, but call the sheriff's office and let's get something started.
Absolutely. And look, a lot of times we just urge people to use common sense. When you get that call that says that a family member's been in a crash or something, typically those reactive instincts go in, and you want to help and you want to know how you can help. And that's how scammers take advantage of you. But look, like the grandparent scam, a lot of those can easily be solved with you just having your spouse or hanging up and having someone contact the family member. We had an intricate scam one time that I went and sit at the victim's house, and it had me going for a lot of the story until they asked him to go get Green Dot gift cards, or until they asked him to go get Nike gift cards. That's obviously not the way that you're going to pay something legitimate. We've had people talk about the sheriff's office and trying to send in tax payments or payments for a warrant using Nike gift cards. At some point, common sense has to prevail, and you have to say, well, wait a minute, why would the sheriff's office be asking for Apple or Nike gift cards? And we're not. Obviously, we accept cash, though, for those tax payments. But ultimately, that's what you have to look out for, is just using some common sense. And when people ask for something silly or out of the ordinary, it's probably a scam. Even if it sounds really legitimate, just use some common sense and take some common sense measures to try to figure it out.
Yeah, one story that I have, and then we'll switch gears. I want to talk a little bit about the holidays. I got the jail scam, okay, and from supposedly one of my grandsons. This is so and so from some correctional institute in Missouri or wherever it was. Anyway, he said, we've got your grandson, and he needs some help, and I'm going to put him on the phone so that he can give you the proper information. Well, they bring this kid-sounding guy on the phone, and the first thing he said was, Grandpa? And all my grandkids call me Poppy. So right away, I knew it wasn't any of mine. And of course, when somebody's talking to you, listeners, on one of those scams, look for a telltale sign, like something like that, and you can find out real quick. But the name of the game is just what you said.
So to talk about that, the victim's house that I actually sat at actually had a similar situation, except the person impersonating his grandson actually called him by the nickname that would have only been. So what we devised from that is they probably did scouting. They probably went on Facebook, looked at pictures where it said me and Poppy, or whatever your name is, might be for your grandfather, and they figured it out. So that's how smart scammers are getting. And look, when it comes to trying to steal your money from you, these people they're worthless. They will do anything they have to. If it means go and do a little bit of research on Facebook about you, they'll do it. So that goes in line with being careful about how much you actually put out there to the world. And that's a whole other discussion. But that's just an example of how just a seemingly innocent post could come back to bite you.
Amen. No question about it. Listeners, the only thing we can tell you is be careful, be alert, be cautious. Unfortunately, this is the world we live in today.
Camp Lejeune Justice is responsible for the content of this ad. Attention Marines, military, contractors, and family members stationed at Camp Lejeune for 30 days or longer between August 1953 and December of 1987. For 34 years, those at Camp Lejeune were exposed to contaminated drinking water, resulting in devastating injuries. Passage of the Camp Lejeune Justice Act of 2022 would allow victims to seek compensation for illnesses and injuries linked to the toxic water.
For a free consultation, call 800-311-3532. That's 800-311-3532.
Holidays coming up. We talked about scamming, but man, we got Thanksgiving coming up. We got Christmas coming up. Let's talk about being careful.
Well, on the lines of a scam, and we mentioned it earlier about local scams, it's rare that we have local scams, but one of the forms of those local scams will be when someone comes up to you in a parking lot and says, hey, can I get some change or whatever, or can I get a ride here? Again, we're all giving people, and we all want to believe, and that's why they take advantage of us. Everybody has their own ways of dealing with that. We just urge very cautious. We don't want to tell you absolutely not, you can't help someone if it looks like they need help, but just be very cautious about it. If you're alone by yourself, you may want to tell them, look, I can't help you right now, but if you're going to be back here, I'll come back and help you. Again, if it's somebody that's desperate and really needs help, I can't believe they would turn it down. But you want to keep your distance. A lot of times we'll have people that will come up to, write a check. Hey, I need to cash this check. Can I get cash? Obviously, that's a bad check. So you don't want to partake in that. If they had a legitimate check in a legitimate bank, they can just go to the bank and get that cash. Or they want to give you, maybe gift cards and exchange for something. It can take a lot of different forms. The rumors that you see on social media about human trafficking and sex trafficking, while those are certainly concerns, they're not wholeheartedly legitimate concerns. That's going to happen a lot less frequently, and we haven't seen evidence of that type of stuff in our area. Should you be aware of your surroundings? Absolutely. But should you be aware because your kids might get kidnapped for sex trafficking? It's not a likelihood. It's not impossible, but it's not likely. But there's plenty of other reasons to keep your eyes on your kids, and plenty of other reasons. When you are going out shopping for the holidays and you have kids, that's going to distract you. So maybe you don't want to bring them when you go holiday shopping, and a lot of times you won't, right? Because you're shopping for them. But anytime there's going to be a lot more people in these parking lots. So even if you're not shopping for Christmas gifts, be careful anytime you go to a shopping center this holiday season. Because just with the uptick in the number of shoppers, it's going to create opportunities for people like this to approach you and things to happen. And it may not be someone that's going to be so obvious. It might be someone that's a little bit more careful. They'll look for an opportunity. They may work in tandem with someone else. They may look for an opportunity to distract you and steal your purse that's in a buggy or something along those lines. So having kids with you will distract you because you're focused on your kids. Having your phone out and trying to text somebody or call somebody while you're walking back to your car is going to be a distraction. So what we urge people to do is when you're shopping, especially when you're buying high-priced items or shopping at any sort of store that has high-priced items that could make you a target. And you're by yourself, we urge you to make sure you get your keys out while you're in the store, so you have your keys ahead of you before you get to your vehicle. Make sure you leave your phone in your purse or in your pocket. You do not want that distraction. Well, again, if it's important, you'll be able to call them right back or text them right back once you get to your car. Make sure you get to your car, leave, and maybe park. If you have to check your phone, leave, park somewhere else, and then check your phone. What you don't want to do is go back to your car, put all the stuff in your car, get in your car, and then just stay there. You want to at least move to a different location, because you want to limit how much you're a target. You want to take that target off your back, and by doing some of those things, it's easier. One of my favorite pieces of advice that I always take every year is when you go Christmas shopping, throw some blankets in the back of your car, especially if you have an SUV or something like that, or even the backseat of a car where you're going to be putting those items where they're not concealed by a trunk. You want to throw blankets over them so that you're not advertising to thieves what's inside your car. That's an easy thing to do. It doesn't really cost anything, and it can save you a lot of headache.
You know, the other thing you mentioned too was kids. Listeners, if you got your kids with you, keep them with you. Don't let them roam the store. Don't let them walk around. Keep them with you, because you just never know. I had an incident with one of my daughters last year. Was telling me about my grandson. Thank goodness she had him in tow. You know, so please keep them in tow. Keep them close to you at all times. The other thing is, of course, is drinking and driving in Christmas holidays. Well, Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's. You guys are going to be out on the road again.
Oh, absolutely. Like our counterparts from state police always tell everybody, how many drinks is too many? One drink is too many. If you're planning to even have one drink, make sure that you're designating a driver. A lot of times people say, oh, I'm just going to have one drink, and they have more. But even if you have one drink, look, alcohol affects people differently. And even though you think you can handle it, as soon as you get behind the wheel of that car and you get pulled over for doing something that may not be related to drinking and driving, if it's suspected and you're tested and you might be 0.08, you're still over the legal limit. So is that one drink worth a lifetime of hassle of having that DWI on your record is the question. And for me and a lot of other people, it isn't. So you have to make that decision before you leave the house. If you are going to drink, or someone from your family is going to drink, you want to make sure you designate a driver. Now, obviously, time plays a factor, and people ask, well, what if I have a drink and then I'm somewhere for 4 hours? Well, that's a little bit different, but how many places are you going for 4 hours over the holidays? Probably not too many, and probably not too many where you're only going to have that one drink. So again, use some common sense when it comes to that type of stuff. But you can bet, and look, don't just look for our announcements of checkpoints. Absolutely, we still use checkpoints, and those are still helpful to us as a way of really pointing out, you know, look, we're going to be out in full force tonight. There's going to be a checkpoint somewhere in Lafourche, and we do announce the day, but we don't announce the exact location. So you don't know where we're going to be. So it's not like, you know, you can avoid it without knowing. And the only way to really avoid it is to stay home or to not drink and drive. And look, for those thinking, well, I figured it out. I have a friend. He's going to pass through, and when he sees it, he's going to tell me, okay, it's on LA1, so I'll just go home on 308. Well, guess what? Guess what we have on 308? We don't have a checkpoint, but we have deputies that are specifically looking for drivers. And I'll tell you that you're probably much more likely to get found and pulled over by someone, by a deputy that's specifically looking for impaired driving than you would in a checkpoint. So even if we don't have an advertised checkpoint, or even if you think you've outsmarted the system, I can promise you haven't. Our deputies, state police, and obviously all of our local municipalities will absolutely be on the road. And we'll have additional officers on the road just looking for impaired drivers.
Well, you bet, listeners. Let me tell you, nobody likes to party more than me. The thing and I'm serious, get a designated driver, or stay home and drink, whatever. But please do not drink and drive. Nothing good comes out of that, I promise you. We got to take a short break. We got Brennan in the house. We got Brennan outside today, not in the house. He's got a great feel-good story to talk about. We'll be right back here at Kbze 105.9.
Camp Lejeune Justice is responsible for the content of this ad. Attention Marines, military, contractors, and family members stationed at Camp Lejeune for 30 days or longer between August 1953 and December of 1987. For 34 years, those at Camp Lejeune were exposed to contaminated drinking water, resulting in devastating injuries. Passage of the Camp Lejeune Justice Act of 2022 would allow victims to seek compensation for illnesses and injuries linked to the toxic water.
For a free consultation, call 800-311-3532. That's 800-311-3532.
And welcome back, listeners. Brennan Matherne in the house, outside this morning, of course, with Public Information Officer with the Sheriff's Office. And we always talk about a lot of things with our guests, but very seldom do we talk about something that makes you really feel good. Got a story called Bless Your Heart, which is a lead in to what Brennan wants to talk about. But he already told it to me. It's a great story. I want you to hear it. There's some good people and some good things that are going on in Lafourche Parish.
Well, I'll first tell the story about how I got involved with them back when I started with the Sheriff's Office, and when I was coming over from Lafourche Parish government, and the sheriff was talking to me about becoming Public Information Officer. At the time, the predecessor for 10 years was Larry Wydell. And I remember Larry, not just for his work as the PIO, but his work in the community. And he would write columns for the Lafourche Gazette, and he would host a lot of community events. And people knew him, yes, as PIO, but people also knew him for all the stuff that he did and the goodwill that he did, even in retirement. So I told the sheriff, like, I just don't want to come in and do this. Like, I want to give back to the community, and I want to have that, that same legacy that Larry left. And it took a while, and I tried to do a lot of things, but then I found that opportunity came up for me. Bless Your Heart nonprofit started in 2020 by Jure Gyro, who was a former assistant district attorney, now has her own law practice. She works with Henry Lafourche out of his office in La Rose. And she and Hillary Crum were two good friends that from the La Rose area that decided to get together with some other local people, and they wanted to make masks during COVID for first responders. So I remember going and accepting their donation. They had a lot of handmade masks that some local people had made, and they ultimately gave those out to to us at law enforcement, to local first responders. And this was kind of in May, like right when things were getting started, and masks were hard to find, and so people were doing this. Then a little bit later, they get an opportunity to raise some money for a local friend who was trying to fight cancer. And they decided to do a plate lunch dinner, and like you and I have been to a million plate lunch dinners, and they work. This thing was more successful than any of their wildest dreams could have been, and it had a lot to do with social media and the marketing job they did on social media. That's when their name really got out there with Bless Your Heart nonprofit. And then a little bit later, of course, when the Seacorp power overturned outside of Port Fouchon, they came in and they helped the families. They gave them gas cards to go back and forth. They were helping them with some toiletries and things that they needed. So that was another big way that they stepped up. And there was little things here and there, but of course the big one was Hurricane Ida. And not maybe a couple days after Ida hit, they had boots on the ground, and they had plane loads of supplies coming into the Galliano airport. They had, again, this is all volunteer. And they started this effort. They got, Jure will tell the story that they started crying when they got their first $5,000 check during their first giveaway after Ida, which was on the weekend after Ida hit. Well, that first $5,000 check was a drop in the bucket, as it turns out. They ended up raising $1.1 million from generous donations from all over the country and including our own community. And we're able to turn that around. They've bought homes, motorhomes for 16 or 17 families in the South Lafourche community whose houses were devastated. So, being able to say that you work with a nonprofit that's literally put roofs over people's head, not just one family, but 17 families, is something special. My role initially was when they first got started, they wanted a podcast, and they looked to me, having a history in radio, they looked to me to host. And look, I always look for that opportunity to get back into radio, but I didn't like the commercial side of it. I liked the actual show part, but the sales and all the work part was tough. But being able to have a show where we get to talk to local people all the time sounded good to me. And we just wanted to share people's stories. So we started the DTB podcast, the Down the Bayou podcast, and it was great. We had a great first season. We ended with Chet Chassaw talking about Port Fouchon and all the stuff there, and then Ida hit maybe a month after our last episode aired. We talked with Bless Your Heart afterwards, and then our first guest of season 2 was Lady of the Sea, talking about, they actually asked us to come on the podcast to talk about all the stuff going on because so many people were listening to us, and we did another great season. We had Parish President Archie Chassaw on. We had Lindsay Lasang, a doctor here at Thibodaux Regional, and then we finished up with Mike Detillier telling his story, a native of Central Lafourche. And it's just been awesome. We have a lot of big names, but we also have some, people that maybe you haven't heard of, like T. Roy Bourne, who's a commercial fisherman and been living in Golden Meadow all of his life. So we're just telling people stories and getting them down in audio form so that future generations can share in it. The idea was that the podcast would bring attention to the nonprofit, but as we were kind of talking before, I think the work that the nonprofit has done has been so amazing that they've actually brought attention to the podcast. So it's just awesome to be a part of it, and my role is starting to grow a little bit with the organization. But finding this opportunity to help and give back to people, getting my kids involved has been awesome, and it's really a blessing, no pun intended, to have Bless Your Heart here in our community for sure.
I love feel-good stories, and when you hear, Ida was bad enough, and when you hear, I'm listening to you, 1.1 million, man, that's a lot of dollars, and all local, and as you and I were talking earlier, listeners, 100% of that money goes to helping other people, no administrative costs. That's awesome. And I think
that's the incredible thing about this. And when you're talking to people, and this is not to downplay any charity. I mean, the wildly successful charities have to have some overhead costs. We understand to have an administration. It just happens that, to date, I'm sure eventually this charity is going to become big enough that they will have some overhead costs. But when they just started out and when they were working for Ida, it was straight, it was absolute straight donations that were going right back to people. We had our first annual gala earlier this year, raised another $50,000 from that, from generous people in the community. And I think that was the idea in the beginning, was just to get people in the community to donate and give back. But because it kind of went worldwide, so to speak, with Hurricane Ida, and we got donations from all over the country, now this local group kind of feels that the sky's the limit, and they're all about giving back. They recently had a local group that donated a building for them, an old bank facility in the LaRose area. So now they actually have a brick and mortar home to store some of those supplies and things to give back. So I only see the road going up for this nonprofit. Bless Your Heart has been a real godsend to the people in the South Lafourche area. And you talk about how bad Ida was, and I still got evidence of that. I'm still looking at plywood walls in my office at the sheriff's office.
I'm looking at water stains in my house yet, but anyway, it's a great story. In fact, I'm going to get on. I'm sure it's got a Facebook page. I'm going to get on Facebook page and just see if I can send them a little check and help them out. Just a great story. Brennan Matherne, Public Information Officer for the Lafourche Parish Sheriff's Office. Hey, thanks for taking the time being with us today. We really appreciate it, Brennan.
Pleasure to be here, Gene. I'm happy to do it. This is a very interesting setting, and the first radio interview that I've done on video. So this is definitely a change, but this is pretty cool.
Thanks for being with us. Hey, listeners, don't forget, we are being brought to you by Kbze 105.9. And please tune us in, tell your friends about it, and there's going to be more. We're just getting started. Have a great day.
Emerald Lagasse here, and I'm so excited to tell you about my French door air fryer 360. Extra large 26-quart capacity. Cook with up to 70% less calories from fat than deep frying. That's a big deal, my friend. 360 degrees of superheated air gives you fast, even cooking. My 10-in-1 French door air fryer 360 grills, air fries, dehydrates, roasts, bakes, broils, proofs, slow cooks, and toasts. This baby does it all. These French doors are a game changer. Look at how easy that is.
Now, find out how you can try Emerald Lagasse's French Door Air Fryer 360 with 3 cooking tiers, fetch tool, air frying rack, and drip tray in your home for 30 days for just $14.99. Order now and you'll also get Emerald's Air Fryer Favorites recipe book. And we'll automatically upgrade you to our bonus cooking kit free. Plus, find out how you can get free shipping. This offer will not last, so call or click now to order.
You're gonna love it. I guarantee it.
We're right here. Hey, thanks for locking it in on the Steve Harvey Morning Show right here on KBZE 105.9 FM.
Well, hey, everybody, your old friend is back, and I'm keeping up with technology. Hello, friends, it's Gene Richard, inviting you to join me for Dialogue, a video and audio podcast presented by KBZE 105.9 FM. Look for the podcast on my Facebook page, on the KBZE YouTube page, and on the Thibodeau Now Facebook page. The audio podcast will be available on these social media apps, Podbean, and TuneIn. Stay up to date with Thibodeau News on Dialogue, the podcast. We're going to change it up once a week and hopefully more as it grows in viewer and listenership.